Ladies and gentlemen, for Wednesday finance meetings, which we have over the last number of years paid attention to how the county can manage its costs and revenues to produce the kinds of results that we want. We talk in most meetings about specific issues, specific efforts to either better manage costs or enhance our revenues. But ultimately, it all comes down to the annual budget, which is probably the best snapshot of exactly where we are and potentially where we're headed. So what we have for you today is the first presentation on the budget for 2016. I want to thank our finance department for all the work that they put into this. I think it's contains a lot of very positive things, but without letting the cat out of the bag, I'm going to turn this over to Dana and her team to walk us through this.
Before we get started, can you introduce to everyone your team?
Yes. We have some new faces.
This is Brandon Yeager, Stephanie Phillips, and Carrie. You're going to have to help me with your last name because I could never get it right. Better she say it than me.
It's a very common sentence in Michigan.
You know, there are just some names that just, I can spell it. So during this presentation, we'll give you an update on what we expect to happen financially in 2015. We'll give you the 4-year forecasting, and as normal, the data is presented from the focal point of the general fund. And when we talk about fund balance in the presentation, it's what we use for budgetary fund balance. It's the combination of unassigned fund balance plus assigned for future budgetary requirements. So when we talk about changes throughout the presentation, it could be both a change in revenue or an ongoing change in expense. And then up front, I'm going to talk a little bit about 911 subsidy. I know Bob talked about it a little bit today, but throughout the presentation, you'll hear some recurring themes about we need to update 911 subsidy for a few factors. When we started developing the projections and working on this, Claudia did not have full information on how we were going to be allowed to use the deferred balance in the wireless funds and the current funding. Since then, we've gotten some pretty good news. They're combining all of the different types from July 1st to December 31st. So it's all 911 funding as opposed to wireless and wireline. How does that help us? There was a shortfall on the wireline side of the equation. So we believe that we'll be able to decrease the subsidy beyond what we have it in the presentation. But we don't have those numbers compiled yet.
Did he indicate when those dollars will come in?
We actually have $1.9 million in the bank account right now that we just haven't been able to earn because the expenses didn't match that. We're able to go back to July 1st and recalculate the subsidy.
Okay. So regardless of where the state budget is, those dollars are going to continue to flow into the counties.
The money that we have in deferred is here. However, I believe the wireless is still going to continue because they're still receiving that money. I think it's not part of the general fund budget. I don't know that for sure.
All right.
And in general, your approach to take is a conservative approach if possible.
Yes.
Not overstate or assume that we're going to be getting exactly we might be, but we're not sure.
Correct. This is showing what our fund balance has been since 2013. The actuals for 13 were 20.9 million, 2014, 23.8, and we're projecting 24.3 for the end of 2015, and that's 113 days of the general fund operating expense. This is showing what we projected at our last meeting in the first column versus what we're projecting this time. Overall, our projections haven't changed much. The revenues have changed about $277,000, the expense $159,000. Two of the things within the operating have changed. $736 is the subsidy, as I talked about before. That number will probably decrease. And transfers in debt, that is one-time monies. We had 2011 project monies that were still outstanding. We used them to fund the last debt service payment. The note of caution is that if there's any more funds that wouldn't come out of that money, it will come out of the general fund now. But it didn't make sense to leave that money sitting there. This is showing what actually occurred in 14 versus what we're projecting to occur in 15. So it's a comparison to actuals to the projections. 15.
Okay.
Did I say 16? I meant 15.
No, that's fine. You're right.
Salaries are increasing 1.3%. Benefits 1.8%. That's a combination of medical insurance went up, retirement went down. Operating is
Sorry, the retirement went down because,
market conditions and
thank you. We did better in the stock market, so we easy to
Yes.
fund.
I think some of the formulas behind the scenes were changed and updated based on some other categories. Operating expense, I think, is increasing 1.4%. Subsidies are increasing 18.6%. Again, that's related to the 911 subsidy that will most likely go down. Capital is increasing 98%. That's for the paving project, 3 roof replacements, and pictometry. Pictometry is financial reporting that's causing that increase. We have to book the full software licensing agreement and the year the contract is signed.
Even though they're paid over 3 years.
Even though it's paid. And we also will have to budget for it over
those
the 3 years. It's
just even though it's actually one time.
correct.
Or we
It's just-
should consider it one time.
Yes.
Okay.
This year, we're booking a revenue and an expense. And the transfers in debt service is decreasing 9.2%, and again, that's the use of the project monies to fund the last debt service payment. Our revenues are increasing $757,000 or 1.5%, and the other revenues are decreasing 1.2%. The majority of that is caused by state pass-through grants, which are off, and there's increases to the recorder of deeds filing fees and prison housing.
And I'm sorry, the net on that is what? Do we have that?
257?
No, that's the decrease in revenue, correct?
You want the overall,
Yeah, when you factor the two together, considering one's larger than the other, 11.
yeah, it would be on page 9.
Okay, thanks.
Correct. That's the projected number, not the actual. So,
Yeah.
okay. This is showing the history of our capital expenditures. It is general fund capital. We broke it out into several categories: maintenance, IMTO, ERP, election machines, and everything else just as general fund. And the bottom part of the slide is showing 2004 through 2014, what actually occurred. And the top of the slide is our projections for 2015 through 2019. And in the projections, there are not specific, and not in all cases, there's not specific capital associated with those dollars. We do that based on historical trends, the expectations, and those will change as needs change and as things are approved or grant revenues are derived.
And those election machines are actually the outlier.
I'm sorry.
The election machines are actually the outlier because no one knows whether that's going to be a state full bond
Correct.
or how that's going to happen.
Correct, but we're leaving it in the projection because
Correct.
we know it's gonna happen, we just don't
Somewhere.
know at what time period
Right.
or what the revenue source will be.
Is that the worst case amount that's projected right now is 4 million? Okay.
Yes,
Is that it's kind of my question, is the percentage of the total cost do we think that is? Is that all of it?
that's 4 million is 100%
Or-
cost.
Okay, so if we bear the entire thing,
It's $4 million to replace them all.
Now, when we get to 2019, that number could go up or down based on what market conditions are for election equipment. Now we're jumping into the 2016 budget. The first slide is showing you on the first column what we're expecting to put on view in November. And the second column is what we're projecting to end 2016 at. And based on our projections, we are expecting to end the year at $23 million fund balance.
Which is how many days?
110, isn't it?
Yes, 110.
110, yeah.
Yeah, when we do projections, there are a lot of variables that are going into the things that we have to think about when we're developing our projections. And the next 2 pages are just different things that we have to think about. They're not always a current impact to the general fund, but we always have to keep our eye on these things may eventually impact the general fund. So you may see some things listed, like the nursing home and bridges that aren't currently part of the general fund projections, but we do keep an eye on those things. And this is just simply a list of not all, but some things that could impact the general fund.
Okay, I'm sorry. How much would that ARC be?
For 2016, the estimate is $4 million.
And they may impact the budget favorably or otherwise.
Or otherwise, yes. So the first page is expenditures.
One question on that, since we're on that topic. What's the underlying assumption trend-wise on the ARC? I mean, is it, do we have a built-in percentage up or down, or keep it neutral, or when you came up with your 4 million?
Lucky for us with the ARC, we have, Huggins actually develops the original estimate for the budget, and then they update with the actual in May. So the $4 million actually came from an actuary.
Okay.
When we do the out years, we base that on a percentage based on what's occurred in the past and basically what the market's doing.
Okay, I guess that was part of the question, which is not aimed at you, which is how long of a tail is on the market, because everybody knows the market's been a very difficult situation now and could be poised for that perhaps for the long term. I'm wondering how long it'll take for that to show up in our outcome. I'm not really asking you, we've had that discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a similar question because, you know, the projections on this, you know, might have been when the stock market was doing pretty good. And now, you know, I've seen the drop off here.
And Bob is watching the market, and if the market is still in a negative
Fall.
full fall in the October, November range, he will go up and get another estimate from the actuary so that we can update before the budget goes on.
Good,
But
so
then-
we'll have a new number before.
Correct. But the reality is, it's based on December 31st, so it could still change. May we have the true number.
And of course, we've heard this before, you can't borrow. Tax anticipatory notes do not go into the ARC. Right?
Technically, no, because you have to pay the tax anticipation note at the end of the
Before.
year, and so it
Right.
doesn't carry you into the next year.
Okay.
So technically, you are correct.
Okay.
So unlike other counties, we need sufficient funding unlike some other counties that aren't as in good financial shape as we make adequate funding of the pension mark a priority and make sure that there's enough in there so that we don't start to fall behind. And we've been highly successful at doing that.
Failing to make that, I believe, has significant consequences. Now, if you're prepared to accept those consequences and whatever collateral damage comes with that, fine. But in the past, that's not been the case here.
Correct.
Jumping on point on that is that and I know I'm getting ahead of us, we're going to have a discussion regarding the budget impacts of the current state budget impasse and our outlays in regards to that. So is your analysis including preserving an adequate amount for the ARC payments, so we're not running short if there is no resolution of the budget impasse? We know we have to make that payment. So
Yes.
we are conserving enough to ensure that we're
At this point, we are fully funding everything. So, and that's some of the discussions that we've had. We have to have a plan in place
Right.
in the November timeframe to start pulling back on some of the things that we're funding in order to make it to January, because we really can't take out the tax.
So it's baked in there, it's essentially
Yeah.
the $4 million that's required is baked in there.
is in here. Now,
Well, and interestingly enough, an email just arrived from a county that shall go unnamed, whether or not they're sending revenue to the Commonwealth. And that was a, hey, by the way, what are y'all doing? And why are we sending forth dollars when in fact we're sort of at this impasse and not seeing anything come the other way? I'm just gonna throw that out, kind of for the record, everybody can hear it. And again, I'm sure other counties are having the same conversation.
I think that came up the last time there was a budget that passed, a serious budget that passed, the Warren McCann's budget, and there was a lot of discussion about it at the time.
Small rural counties, whatever those dollars are significant to them, as would our dollars be us. Whatever.
It's a whiskey rebellion.
yes.
Whatever.
So on this page is the list of some of the revenue variables.
It's Cadillac tax, is that like the real word? Is that just sort of, I mean, is that the professional word on that? Is it really?
That's what they're calling it.
Okay.
I mean,
I mean-
there's a Bobby Grossen title for it, which is 3 lines long.
All I'm
but
saying
it
is-
It is referred to.
When we
in
see it in
government
print, okay.
and in
All
the
right.
insurance industry and
Okay.
amongst the
All
police.
right.
as
It just-
So it's not one of the forbidden politically incorrect words like Obamacare, which we're supposed to refer to.
I have no comment on that. I can just tell you that Cadillac tax is
It is
the
official.
W tax or the
All right.
Maserati tax.
Well, the
It's a
non-auto
luxury
tax was the, drink tax in Allegheny County. But anyway, I just want to make sure that the documents we produce reflect
Yes.
sort of the professionalism of what it is, but.
Along those lines, it says 2016 includes preliminary measures. The actual impact of this, if it goes into effect, and we're all anticipating, I guess that it will, but is when? 2017 or 18? 18? Okay.
And
So
I-
what are we talking about when we say 2016 includes preliminary measures?
It would be the presentation that HR provided based on the benefit changes and things. They're already starting to make adjustments to benefits to avoid the future tax.
If you count, I think what it, just to refresh everybody's memory, the presentation showed where we were, where we are, and where we would be if we didn't make changes come 2018, and assuming that the Cadillac tax was implemented. And it's assuming that that will happen to some extent, and at some point in the future, the sooner we begin to prepare and move our benefit structure in line with a strategy to minimize our exposure on that, the more successful we'll be. And in fact, that included measures taken for 2016 benefits.
Oh, rather than reactive, being proactive.
It's painted into a form.
And I'm sure we'll have more discussion about this.
Lots.
The next page is just a listing of different variables on the revenue side of the equation. Right now, our local economy is booming. We're having a lot of growth in both population and average incomes and those types of things. But one thing I like to point out to everybody is that doesn't always equate to the real estate tax. They are two very different revenue sources. So the next slide is actually showing our growth in the taxable assessment base from year to year, excluding reassessment years, because it would skew the results.
Can you go back? What's the difference on the telecom and the 911 funding? What was the telecom revenue?
The telecom is that contract with the vendor on
It's going into the underpayment.
Got it.
The recovery
Okay,
of
the recovery.
what we
Okay.
should have paid by the
Okay.
telecom.
And again, in taking a conservative approach, we note this, we do not include it because it's an unknown adjustment.
So our assessment base changes in between 1% and 3% annually from the low growth years to the higher growth years. So there's not a big normal growth the way you see other numbers, if there's a 10% boom in population or something like that. So this is just a refresher on
This coincides with what the planning department presented to us. There's in fact population with fastest growing county in the state that doesn't translate into a huge in immediate,
Property tax.
property tax revenue increase.
So now we're going to talk about the projections between the 2015 projections and the 2016 projections. And we're expecting to end the year at $23 million, the 110 days of budgeted general fund operating expense. In that, we're expecting salaries to increase 5.7%, benefits 6.8%, operating expense to decrease 0.5%, subsidies decreasing 5.6%, again, that's related to the 911. Capital decreasing 13.6%, and the transfers in debt will increase 14%, and that's related to the one-time monies from 2015. On the revenue side of the equation, the real estate tax is expected to increase $655,000, or 1.3%, and the other revenues decreasing 2.2%. The majority of that is related to the Keystone Shippensburg Library grant that is passing through us to the library.
And that project is well underway if anyone's been down to our negative list. You won't recognize the old library.
Dan, could you just to back up on the 911 decrease? The legislature just passed this law supposedly to increase revenues from 911. So why are we projecting in 2016 to see a decrease in funds?
That's a decrease in the general fund subsidy. So
all
where
right.
other revenues are increasing, the general fund subsidy will decrease.
I got
I mean, we had stated about 1.2, 1.1 was coming from the general fund as a subsidy.
it. Okay.
With
I'm sorry. I
the
missed
new
it.
legislation, that number should be looking rather good to us right now.
I jumped from the subsidy decrease down to 911 decrease, and that's what threw me.
On the projected revenues, is that the $500,000 that was back on state pass-through grants on page 7? Yeah, projected revenues, real estate 757, 257, is that the $500,000?
It's state pass-through grants did decrease in 15, but they're also going to decrease another $500,000. Redevelopment authority is down in 15,
Okay, so that,
and Shippensburg will be down next year.
okay, so that's not the total.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
And I'm assuming it's mostly redevelopment authority because that's pretty sporadic from year to year. And of course, when the revenues go down, so do the expenses and vice versa. So in the finance office, we spend a lot of time playing with numbers and looking at different ratios to see potential areas of concern or things that are going well. So one of the things that we look at is to see if pieces of the pie change over time. And we do general fund expenses. We look at the general fund expenses. And so we are picturing here what the different pieces of the pie were for the general fund expenses in 2005, 2010, and 2015. And in that, we don't have a lot of variation, changes between the years. And you can read many things into that, but overall salary and benefits, when you combine the two as one, haven't changed much. Operating hasn't changed much. Subsidies down a little, transfers and debt services up a little, but overall, there's not a lot of change over the last decade. Now, if one of those started changing dramatically, we would start looking into why is it changing. Sometimes we look into, we expect it to change and it didn't, why? So that's just one of the things we look at. And on the revenue side of the equation, we talk a lot about the general fund revenues and the pieces of pie. And the real estate tax is 72% of the general fund revenue. But when you look at the total county revenue, the real estate tax is only 23%. And our federal and state grants and departmental charges make up the majority of the county's overall revenue sources.
One question, since when we typically refer to the revenues, we generally break the library millage out from the general fund millage.
Yes.
And yet in this diagram, you have the folded under the general fund. Can I ask why that is?
For budget purposes, we include the library tax because it comes into us and then we have to pass it out
Okay.
to the library. For financial reporting purposes, it does not show up.
Okay.
Part of the reason we have to keep it on is we have our system locked down, we can't pay any expenses.
Yes.
And so, in order to be able to pay the library the money, that's the,
And it's collected as a tax. You don't have the option of not paying one or the other, correct?
correct,
The tax bill arrives.
correct,
You can't pick and choose which one you're gonna pay.
correct.
Well, you could, but then
It's not dissimilar
see somebody else.
from an earmark grant that comes in to pass through, that has to go through a specific.
I just question because it's not necessarily consistent with the way we generally report things out, but it makes sense when you explain it.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I should have pointed that out. And that is, we do that every year, it's in the budget, but it's not in the financial statements.
And just to reiterate, this is not discretionary money that the county can distribute as it feels.
Correct.
It goes straight to one.
And on the flip side of that, there are employees that are county employees also flow through the budget.
Yeah, then that 3.3 million is part actually the general fund budget then too, not just part of the revenue pie, it's actually part of the general fund budget. But the money goes, like Larry just said, money goes, you know, it's like a pass-through from us
Right.
directly to the library board. Library board makes the decisions on how to spend that money,
Correct.
which is to distribute a good bit of it to our libraries.
Yes.
This slide showing the projections for 2015 through 2019. 15, we're projecting a $24.3 million fund balance. In 16, $23 million fund balance. You can see in the out years, we've got some IMTO projects, 911 projects, and the election machines around 2019 at approximately $4 million.
And you don't know what that overmatch is gonna be to children and youth.
Mine at this point,
Right. I mean,
we know.
someone looks at the question marks, that's what that is about.
Correct.
And again, just, I know we have this discussion every year, those outside, all the projections are based on historical information and historical trends.
Yes.
I mean, so it includes all the weight of what has transpired over an extended period of time in the past. As we perform better or more efficiently, those new numbers get built into the data that's used to project the trends. And I think we'll see my favorite graphic, the
Yes.
infamous southeast, northwest to southeast line.
On the IMTF projects, is it pictometry kind of where? Is that under capital, up above?
Up above in 15.
Okay.
Okay, so the, you know, budget that'll be put on display is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $75 million. This year's budget was $75 million, I think. We're talking now about the general fund. But what you're projecting at this point in time is that as we wrap up 2015, we will have spent $70.8 million. And what you're projecting in 2016 is that we will actually spend $72.8 million. And you're projecting revenue for 2016 of $71.5 million. So what you're suggesting here is that there's a significant gap between what you're projecting we're going to spend and how much money we're going to take in. Is that correct?
Let me make sure I understand your question. Are you asking the difference between revenues and expenses, or are you asking the difference between the budget and the
Well,
projections?
we're going to put a budget on display of $75 million,
Yes.
somewhere in that neighborhood. And it's similar to what we put a budget on display of $75 million this past year, and that's what we enacted, that's what we adopted.
Yes.
But you're saying at the end of this year, we will have spent, not 75 million, but we will have spent 70 million, .8 million.
And that's a projection, that number could be different.
Right. And what you're suggesting is next year, that we will actually spend 72.8 million,
Which we're projecting is very, we don't.
which is less than what we're gonna budget, I assume. Okay. Well, our revenue total will be about the same as what it was this year, or a little bit higher.
Mhm.
And all I'm saying is there's a gap between the revenue that's coming in versus what we project to spend in 2016.
Yes. And she will be showing that on one of the later slides, it's
Okay.
$1.3 million.
And we just, once again, not to be word with the fiscal horse, but we try to be as conservative as possible. And I think you outlined in the case of 911, those expenses may in fact be adjusted. And until we know for sure, we budget based on what's actual, or even in some cases, something closer to the worst case scenario rather than something that's overly optimistic or too chancy.
Or in the midpoint, we try to aim for the midpoint.
Has the vehicle fee been included in any of the projections?
It will not show up in the general fund budget because it's in a separate fund, but yes, it is part of the overall budget
Okay, 416.
for 16.
Got it.
And that's the $5 registration,
Correct,
Yes.
which is for bridges, fixed about bridges.
correct. But it's still money
Yes.
that would not be part of what would be the general fund, I guess is what I'm saying.
Correct.
Okay.
On the slide is showing graphical representation of the previous slide, with the maroon bars being the revenue, the blue being expense. And you can see the lines for fund balance. The blue line is where we were projecting last year at this time. The yellow line is the projections as of June. The green line now is our current projections, and you can see moving. As Larry do it, moves.
Moving up to the northeast, which is where we
Northeast.
wanted to go.
And we probably should note that on the original blue line, we did add 19, and that wouldn't have been in our original projections, just to show the election equipment. Because we do 4-year projections as time goes on. So if you go back and research it, you don't see that originally.
So all of these lines include or included the potential expenditure of 4 million in 19?
Yes.
Okay.
Which is, accounts for the nosedive.
Yes.
That's why it drops off so fast to 19.
Yeah. Okay.
On the slide, the first line is showing there's no changes made, what the projections would look like each year. The numbers underneath is the difference in black, the difference between revenue and expenses. The second set is your break even. It takes 2.5% to break even in 16, 4% in 17, 1 in 18, and 9 in 2019. But of course, election issues are out there affecting that. But a change can be an ongoing change in revenue or expenses.
So the break-even essentially is looking at the maintenance of the fund balance at the same level.
Correct.
Okay, pretty much.
On the slide showing the tree projections, you've given several different scenarios of changes in 2016. The first section is a 0% in 16. We're kind of looking at the out years of, what they would look like. Second one is a 2%. We did a 2% change in 16. It shows even the 2% all the way through the out years. Also did a 3% in 16, so you can kind of see what the changes would do. 2% change is about $1 million. Of course, change in revenue or expenses.
So I think the bottom line is that there is no need to consider increasing or propose to increase tax rate for 2016, but that differential could be made up through either increases in revenues or decreases in expenses, increases in revenue that are not derived from increased tax rate. In 2017 and beyond, obviously, this, even though my favorite graph is showing movement in the right direction, we continue to face challenges in the outlying years that will require us to, I hesitate to use the term, stay the course and manage things prudently so that we can, barring completely unforeseen circumstances, maintain the same approach in 17 and 18 and continue on and provide the best value for our taxpayers without, again, barring unforeseen circumstances or new demands or new things that we have to do to not have to raise taxes in the outlying years as well. So once again, it's like a broken record, but yes, we're doing better, but can we rest on our laurels? Absolutely not, because you can see that there are internal tensions that continually sort of push those expenses up at a higher rate of increase than our revenues. So we always have to manage and bring those expenses in line if we want to continue our current load.
Well, you can't anticipate any additional mandates that are going to be coming down. So, whatever is then set either through the federal government or the state to counties to respond to needs to at least be somewhere in the conversation.
And all of these projections, we're expecting that the state budget is passed and remains.
Did you factor in, Dana, the increased cost subsidy for children and youth as a result of the additional employees that we, have had to hire and, to meet all the requirements of the 20-some laws that were passed by the legislature? Is that all included in these projections?
I'm going to hesitate to say yes. But the answer is yes, but if they have to add additional because of those mandates, that's not included.
Well, I think we got some good news here. I think it was just the other week where the original projection, we were looking at something like a $500,000 subsidy next year for children and youth services, and it's a little less than that now, or
500,000.
well, maybe I have that number wrong. I just remember whatever it was. I'm sorry.
They're about 2.8.
What was it?
2.8 million.
I think you're talking about the overmatch.
Yeah, and that's what question marks are
Yeah.
for the overmatch.
Yeah, okay, all right. That's what
But as far as salary and benefits, yes, we've made that commitment to additional employees
Yes.
at this moment.
Yes.
What those numbers may then produce as additional employees is hard to say.
And with the state funds, is it the
Exactly.
other side?
Yeah, but I was just kind of, Barb, I was kind of just following up with what you said in terms of, additional things, that are mandated by the state.
Yes,
And I mean, that
exactly.
is certainly one of the areas where we've seen an increase in cost.
Yes, and we are.
And it's not all funded by the state.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I think we've engaged, our children need to be protected, we need to comply with the law, it's not like it's optional. I think we've engaged in a strategic approach with our children and youth to mitigate risk, and that includes looking at staffing levels. I think our children and youth services has been very strategic and forward-thinking, and has taken a look, and I think, they refine their estimates of their resource needs in trying to align them with metrics such as caseloads and other things to ensure that we have enough people to perform at a high enough level of quality to adequately safeguard the children that they're entrusted to take care of. So while gosh knows what could come down the line, we, I think, have a good process in place to manage things to the extent that we know that our tasks will be.
Yeah, I wasn't in any way suggesting or disputing the need for the services that we're providing off. The point I was trying to make was there are increased costs to the county taxpayers as a result of this. That's
Well, even criminal justice.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, whatever additional mandates may come into the prison, medical, whatever, those expenses that counties need to at least be aware of or anticipate that they have to face.
And just to follow quickly on Commissioner Ennis's comment, I think, we try to, in this process, and I think we enlist the department heads to this effort, is that this is a collective effort. This is not whack-a-mole, where you can just simply throw money at whatever comes and in a panicky sort of way. We try to take a methodical approach to make sure that absolutely everything in the face of even increased costs can be covered so that our service to our taxpayers continues to be done in a way that makes you feel like they get the best value. And that requires taking a look at the relative needs of the department to department. There are key things, as the commissioners have said, that are not open for debate. But faced with rising costs, where do you pull the money? How do you do so in an effective manner? How do you create that space under the salary cap without raising taxes to make sure that we can meet those increased costs that we really do have to make sure we provide?
The slide shows the comparative tax rate for the third-class counties. First section showing the 2014 numbers, and Cumberland County is the lowest of the third-class counties. There's 3 counties we had to use the 13 tax information numbers for because there are 14 cappers were not available. We're still the lowest among the third-class counties.
How's Westmoreland getting twice as much money of us and they only have 100,000 more people? What is their property out there that's bringing in 81 million, and they're only 225 capital? We don't know. I'm gonna find out. I mean, I'm just interested. Where are they getting $81 million? I mean, Lancaster Burke's, by the numbers, okay. I mean, even Northampton at 300,000, they're like almost twice as much. Okay. All right.
The last thing we wanted to go over just quickly again was the state budget in past. Our Hoover grant revenue has been $85 million. For the calculation of cash flow, we're estimating about $3 million is the monthly reduction in cash flow. The county would continue to pay the $3 million monthly without reimbursement from the state. It would be about December, January is our estimated time period. The county would not have the necessary cash to cover general fund salary, benefits, and expenses. Part of the plan of action is by November 1st, we need to start looking to have adjusted payments to providers to zero and only pay for the most critical needs. At some point, if the budget's not passed, critical adjustments will be necessary, which could include cutting programs, furloughs, layoffs. But if people are not receiving the necessary treatment or services, it's going to increase crisis costs in other mandated areas like the prison, children, youth, and courts.
We have no way of knowing what those costs would be.
And those are not included in any of the analysis.
And we, just so everybody knows, there is a process in place where we're going to be meeting, particularly with the human services departments, and actually specifically and in detail map out what our approach would be in order to extend the money that we have as much as possible.
And I think, go ahead.
When you say adjusted payments to the providers to zero, you're talking ending payments. Am I interpreting that correctly? That sentence under plan of action. So
if we're not receiving the funding to pay the providers, maybe not paying this. Now, but what I want to talk, we are still getting a substantial amount of money from the state. Not all funding is cut off.
Now, the second part of my question was, is there any part of that of this work plan that involves perhaps partial payments.
Yes, potentially, that's what we're gonna start getting together on, but
And that would last full time on the back end, or is
potentially,
that?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Well, and a couple things for that. One, I would think by 15 October, that meeting needs to
Oh, it's
start.
yeah.
Okay. The next is, it's interesting to sort of say the words most critical needs, and the most critical needs to whom? You know, everyone is sitting in their own critical need. So that prioritization, I agree. Partial payments are an opportunity, but then if the decreased services, escalate that the critical need is to here, even though you made a partial payment here. And some providers, I don't know a contract arrangement on the providers. We've entered into a contractual agreement, then that opens up sort of, have you received payment for the services rendered? That's a whole other sort of, and we're not alone in this, by any means, we're not. But, and we have sort of prided ourselves that we were able to weather this before. I believe this go around is a little different than before. And what I've heard over the last few years is that individuals are presenting with far more complex cases. So it is not necessarily treatment, but it's placement. It may be incarceration. It may be a variety of things that perhaps in the past wasn't so. So while the cost might have been able to be, borne a few years ago, certainly those providers' costs, we have sat in this room and heard increase in provider costs, that even partial payment might not be enough. So I would just ask that certainly by the 15th, the 14th is a day to kind of look
Actually,
at,
I
but
think it would be good to have that discussion here at the board as well, so.
and I can
mean,
tell you.
I'm talking to one of our colleagues in Lancaster County, they stopped, if I understand it correctly, they stopped making payments to providers on July 1. Right now, we haven't done that, we're continuing
No.
to make the payments. I'm just saying, other counties are dealing with it in different ways. We know we have, like we're children do, 24/7 mandated service provided, and there's other areas, so I am interested in getting involved in understanding the decision-making process with respect to who's going to get paid, who's not going to get paid, who's getting a delayed payment, because I think we need to plan that, we need to talk about it.
And for me, this is certainly not a business kind of decision. I mean, these critical needs are to those experts. I'm not holding those degrees to sort of say, yes, this placement or this care or this provider, needs those funds today and this provider doesn't. I think we need to bring to the table or in the room through the chief clerk, those agencies that professionally providing those services and those degrees can say whatever. Because the last you would want is, here was a scenario that treatment, needed to be provided, but oh, by the way, a decision was made with full funds. So I don't think anyone certainly wants, a county to go down those roads by any means. And I don't believe that, I'm going to say this, I truly don't believe that anyone in the state legislature wants that either. But, this sort of political dance on withholding payments, furloughs, that kind of conversation, I don't believe is anyone's best interest. But we need to be prepared. I would like to see this county prepared to address whatever crisis that may take us down. We're not there yet, but
The good news, if it's not quite a silver lining, this number one, this is not the first time we've had to deal with this. And I think there's been built into some of the relationships with our providers, the understanding that this is part of what happens. And that there have been some significant body of experience that has yielded some good practices to pursue going into the future. Secondly is I think with our human services leadership, we have some of the most experienced and knowledgeable leaders, certainly in the county, certainly and definitely in the state, again, who've dealt with this stuff before but have a high degree of cooperation and collaboration amongst. And clearly, just, I think at the meeting, I think is scheduled for next week.
It's Monday.
To
The
make a
fifth,
plan for
okay.
this, and then we will present out to the board at a workshop meeting what our findings and perhaps recommendations, or proposals, or options are.
Well, I mean, you're reading on page 24, you know, prison, children, youth, and the courts. You know, circumstances we don't have a whole lot of control over.
Nope.
So, but are responsible for providing care.
But I understand you correctly, because I did have a conversation with Dan, that you mentioned, like, if we were to take out a tax anticipation note,
We have to-
essentially that would be that would be actually a revenue anticipation note that we would take out in the anticipation that the General Assembly is actually going to pass a budget, right?
No, it's a tax
No.
anticipation note on our real estate tax.
Yes.
So that we
Well,
would
we've
have to
already
pay.
gotten our real estate tax revenues for this year.
We
So
would have to pay it by December 31st.
Which is why the business, there is a business aspect to do this while taking into account the absolute needs. Our best bet is to get us
Into January.
Right.
before we would have to, if, God forbid.
Because it
we
would
would
have
have-
a whole
January,
year
tax anticipation.
to pay
All right,
that
then,
back.
Yeah,
Right.
I had thought that, you know,
And that's why counties who
If we
will
were-
need that,
We have a December 31st payroll.
right.
We have to have the money to make that payroll. And January 2nd, we can do a tax anticipation note.
Because then we have a whole year to pay that
so
back.
we could not do a tax anticipation.
Well,
But we can do one now, but we have to pay it off on December 31st. We can't reissue another one until January 2nd.
No, I.
So you have to have the cash to make it
So
through
my
those
question
3
was,
days.
if, let's say if there was some, all of a sudden we saw there was gonna be, you know, the parties got together over there and they're gonna, and, because I know there's mechanics involved in actually getting an agreement to an acronym. So let's say in the next, you know, hopefully sooner rather than later, you know, they come to an agreement, but we've got this cash flow problem, but we know that the budget is going to be passed, could we conceivably do a tax anticipation note? And then pay it back when the budget is passed, or no?
No, we would have to pay it back by December 31st.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying.
Yes, we
So-
could, but we have to
But
pay.
I think Commissioner Herzl's point is if somehow, somebody, if whomever at the state level said, you will have money in your bank account before December 31st, okay, then we wouldn't be running at a very risky mode of operation. So unless somebody's willing to do that, our best bet from the business standpoint, and to preserve as much of the essential services as we agree we possibly can, is to get us across that hurdle. Get in the current situation, get us to the first of the year. Then if anything good happens, then obviously we can reassess.
You would need a pretty ironclad guarantee from the company
Yeah,
that the dollars
that's-
would be here at the time, because you have no
Right.
recourse.
No,
Yes.
except
So-
paying the
so
interest on
really-
it
really
and borrowing again.
The idea of tax anticipation note this year is not realistic.
Correct.
Okay.
It is in January, but
It's very high risk.
yes.
And again, Dana's point, if we have a payroll to meet at the end of the year, then we better have enough money in there. And it's not like we can go to the people we took the tax anticipation loan from and say, hey, can you give us a couple of weeks because we got to make that payroll? It doesn't work that way.
No.
What other, if not a tax anticipation note, what other forms of borrowing would be available?
I didn't
To
go
the
to the
best of my
bank.
knowledge, there's none.
Yeah.
We would have to, I,
Larry knows a guy in Jersey.
well, we may be able to take an operations loan, but that,
But the interest on that is,
well, it's beyond that. That's like you're funding your operating expense. It would probably, in a big way, negatively affect our bond rating. I have not even looked into if we could even legally do that.
Well, some
Yeah,
counties are
one more
borrowing,
than-
some counties are already borrowing. Right?
But I think they're borrowing it with the anticipation that they're gonna be able to pay it back on December 31st.
Right.
And depending on how their payrolls run, they may be able to finagle. And on the graph that we have, you know, I know it shows a balance in December, but that's an average daily balance for the whole month. So you're gonna have ebbs and flows in
I
that.
was gonna say, don't let me start getting the giggles here, but I can tell you this. Anytime I hear a finance director talk about finagling into, creative financing, we simply do not want to go down that road. I mean,
Did I say
we do,
finagle?
you
I'm
said
sorry.
those words, finagle. And it's like, really. And for the seriousness of,
I don't remember that term in business.
yeah, I know, finagle.
You went-
Yeah,
you went-
you went to the wrong business, the Jersey. Yeah, for the seriousness of this is, you kind of don't want to go down that path.
No.
And we are not there to go down that path, but need to be prepared to, to say, if the tough decisions have to be made, in that business model of what is the responsible approach for the taxpayers of this county, as a result of, someone else's decisions, we're ready to do that. But,
I think it speaks to the really solid wisdom of maintaining that reserve balance, the fund balance. And when we talk, there's a minimum of 60 days, but we aim to hire based on best practices. And this is the perfect example. It's because we have that fund balance at that level that it is the exact rainy day fund that you have. And many times when things are going well and budgets are passed the fund early, you don't have to worry about that stuff. But when you get into a sticky wicket like this is when this policy and this approach, and our ability to maintain our fund balance at that level pays dividends. It doesn't mean that it's smooth sailing, but it gives us options that we wouldn't have if our fund balance was low.
David, do we know, or anybody, do we know what other counties are in the same position that they're actually fronting money versus just paring back immediately or withholding?
I don't know.
So we don't know.
We've heard anecdotally the different things that are going on. It's a combination of borrowing, starting to cut back. I think CCAP is trying to get people to share information on it, but it's a county.
well, the email today did not come from CCAP, but from a county that asked whether or not they were going to, anybody else going to send forward any additional funds to the state. So I've not addressed that back, but
Yeah, well, CCAP now has, I think, on their webpage or website or whatever, what a lot of the counties are doing. And I haven't had a chance to look at, but I know that, again, just talking to one of our colleagues in Lancaster who told me to stop making payments to providers July 1. I think they've also imposed a hiring freeze, and I'm not sure what other actions that they've taken. But it's not good. And, if they don't get their act together pretty soon, it's going to get a lot worse.
And then we did simplify the $3 million. There's ebbs and flows, there's advances, there's paid in arrears. It's on average $3 million a month. Just so when you start hearing the anecdotes, well, we get all of our funding 3 months later. We just smoothed it for purposes of making it easier to understand.
We're owed $9 million so far.
Yes.
Of that, jumping off of that, of the money that we have fronted to essentially fill that gap for state funding, do we know for certain that 100% of that is going to be reimbursed by the Commonwealth, or do we have a firm number that we know?
I believe in all the scenarios, the funding is remaining relatively stable. From what I understand, where the harm is coming is we're not getting the new people in that need services. So they're not getting the services that they necessarily need because the budget's not in place. So they're not filling their waiting list. Is that a fair statement?
I think the question is, the longer we go, the certainty that we're going to get dollar for dollar reimbursement
Right.
at some point starts to fall off. And this is, I gather from, again, our experienced human services directors, who based on previous experience, say that generally if it's done within the calendar year, you have pretty high certainty that whatever you put out, you will get back that much. The problem is the longer it goes, it gets a little more problematic.
There's also a time value question that's here. We're laying out money that should be other people's.
So for instance, if we had to take out a loan and then pay interest,
yeah.
we wouldn't be reimbursed the interest.
Yeah.
Certainly. But even without a borrower paying interest, it's still costing us because of
Yes.
the financial.
if there were any changes on 24 and 25 to what was presented to our legislators, would you make sure that they see this most current document? It's been a couple weeks, I don't know.
This is exactly what we.
It's exactly, it was, okay. So just wanted to make sure that if there were any changes, that they saw that too.
Very helpful.
It's not everything we presented, it's
No,
just a
but
synopsis.
I just wondered if there were, just to make sure they had.
I want to thank you guys for doing a great job, putting all this stuff together, this plan to work with you on this, and ask if there are any final comments, observations, or questions.
Very well organized, very nice presentation, very well.
Very good. Well done.
Thank you.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.